there's hope. There are structures that can come in that can fix these problems, and not by violent uprising, but just because it's superior technology. I call Bitcoin the digital megalith. Ray Dalio has written like multiple books about the 250-year empire rise and decline cycle. Like that is literally the Pluto return cycle.
When I see things happening in the world, fire in Nepal at the parliament, and the Minister of Finance being chased into a river naked, not allowing people to withdraw their money from banks. And you're seeing these little breadcrumbs of collapse now throughout the world.
I think the institutions that we've come to rely on for like the past couple hundred years really are falling apart. That doesn't mean that the whole world is going to shit. Obviously, there's plenty of things that are beginning and building at this time. Bitcoin is one of them. How's it going?
How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good. Well, thank you so much for joining me. Welcome back to the show. Today I have Erin Redwing with me. She is a Bitcoiner and an astrologist, correct? Is that what you...
Astrologer is what I use. But I don't know, astrologist seems perfectly fine to me too.
Okay. So what do you think, what's the difference between, for those of us who don't kind of know the difference, or is it just the way it's said, or it's not really?
Yeah, I think it's just the way it's said. I mean, you would say like an astronomer, right? Or like, that's what I would translate it to as well.
Yes. Okay. So were you have you been in astronomy for a long time, and I want to know about your journey into Bitcoin and how that connects to this entire space, because I've had people reach out to me saying, I have to have you on, you're definitely right up my alley. I love this kind of just like outside the box ways to connect Bitcoin to other parts of our life. So this is super fascinating to me. So
I can give like just a sort
bit.
of TLDR of my story. So I started as an astronomer, and then I became an astrologer, which is not a normal path. Most astronomers do not like astrologers, and most astrologers are not getting their start by learning like the science of the planets that they end up then studying through astrology. So I was working as like a planetary scientist. I was getting my PhD in planetary science and astronomy at Berkeley when I found Bitcoin. I dropped out of that PhD program to do Bitcoin and astrology stuff full time. So like, don't give me the credit of being Dr. Redwing or anything like that. But I was working in astronomy, and for many years, I was kind of just living a double life as an astronomer for my day job and an astrologer for my passions and kind of on the side. And honestly, it was really just like I don't know, like there wasn't like one moment that made me get into astrology. I think it was just a general sense that astronomy was not answering the questions that I was interested in answering, which were primarily like, are we alone in the universe? The kind of the big question, in my opinion. Working in astronomy and being in academia, especially, I mean, I could go off for an hour about all the problems with academia and science, but they're not doing a great job of trying to answer that question. And I think that question can be answered scientifically, but also like philosophically, spiritually. It's a big question. So I was interested in that.
It's funny because, I guess my personality was, growing up, I loved space. And I think I loved space because I wanted to find out answers of the universe and how it was created. Where did it all start? Like just wanting answers, I just want, it's just so crazy to me that, that the universe is so big, and just wondering how it all began. And I like to connect things to either religion or like how all these things connect together, how they make sense, because I feel like everyone thinks there's all these separate things in our life, but I really feel like they all have some sort of connection. And I always tried to find some kind of answer. But so I was always fascinated by space and science for those reasons, to look for answers. But I always remembered hearing like, the more answers you find, the more questions you get, with science. So it was in a way frustrating, and you go down these endless rabbit holes, and I love learning about the physics and all these things. But that's what's interesting, because you went from one field to the other because you wanted more answers and you're looking for answers. And that's kind of where I want to like eventually, after I want you to continue with your story first, but thinking about how once you find Bitcoin and you find an answer to something, you find that there's an answer for this money problem and what the cause of it is, like the root cause of it, and a lot of these problems we have in the world, it's kind of relieving to find an answer to something because I feel like we just keep asking more questions constantly. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, Bitcoin completely like once you understand Bitcoin, or really it's like once you understand fiat, I think like the world starts making a lot more sense and you start realizing why things don't work. But I'll get there because yeah, I'll get to the eventually my Bitcoin journey. Um, but yeah, I mean, exactly as you said, like I think the reason why it's interesting to study space is because there's these very big unknown questions. And in my opinion, that's not what most of space research is doing at this point. They're not really interested in or trying to answer those questions. Um, and astrology is interesting because it kind of rides the line between science and religion. Like it's been affiliated both with astronomy and with religion. Like the Catholic Church and astrology have always gotten along. A lot of people think astrologers are like antagonistic to Christianity or anything like that. They're not. They lived in harmony for many hundreds, thousands of years. Um, so, yeah, astrology just is kind of this like in between thing where you're using sort of the methodology of science. I think it's pseudoscience, which I say lovingly, but it's, you're kind of using the methodologies of science, but you're asking sort of spiritual and religious questions. And so, um, I don't know, I've always been like an open minded person. And so, understanding astronomy made it easier for me to get into astrology just because I could learn how to do it, like the techniques of it a lot easier. And I felt like it was attempting to answer the questions that I had that made me interested in space in the first place. And so, yeah, for a long time, I kind of like lived a double life and just didn't really tell the people that I worked with what I was into, which made it very easy when I got into Bitcoin because I already felt like I was like, kind of a crazy person with crazy ideas, right? But it was actually astrology that got me into Bitcoin. There was like a significant conjunction at the end of 2020 that was all about ushering in new age
Oh my
energies, Age
gosh.
of Aquarius energies. Do you know about this? Do you remember this? Yeah, it
Well,
was like
okay. So I have,
Saturn and Jupiter.
yes, there was a huge, I remember that happening. And I almost remember, I think it was the date of like December 20th or some,
Yeah,
was
it
it?
was this winter solstice. It was the winter
Yes,
solstice.
the
You're
winter
absolutely right.
solstice. And
Hmm.
I feel like that had something else that was really uh a, another connection that again connecting like religion and all this stuff. But I remember hearing about that and also realizing that there was something about the star, like something about the Star of Bethlehem at that time or something. Like I think,
Interesting.
yeah,
Yeah.
if you look into that, that's pretty a weird coincidence as
Hmm.
far as, so I almost feel like like they say like sort of the three wise men followed the star and that's when Jesus was born kind of thing.
Yes. Yeah. That's what I say about myself, how I found Bitcoin. Because the three wise men were astrologers. They were looking for, signs in the stars for the birth
Yeah.
of Jesus. That
Yeah.
that's what they were looking for.
Isn't that,
So yeah.
yeah, so they found this Messiah, but it was a signal, and that signal I guess happens only every so often, and that
Mhm.
aligned with that solstice, which I
Oh,
thought
that's
was
so
crazy.
interesting. I have to look into that more. Because yeah,
Yeah.
for me, it was just the astrology part was, I mean, that already just that was like, there was a lot going on. I remember everyone, like, I went out to the beach to view the conjunction. Like, you
Mhm.
could see it right after the
Conjunction, yes.
sunset on the the winter solstice. And I remember there were a lot of people out there, and I was like, okay, so a lot of people know about this and care about this. Like, they're probably more astronomy people than astrology people, but who knows? Actually, they could be looking for the Star of Bethlehem or really anything. So,
That was
uh,
more astronomy, I guess, because I was into the
yeah.
whole space and stars and stuff like that, and I would follow I remember the word conjunction,
Hmm.
that's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah,
And you're
yeah,
the
yeah.
first
So
person I've
that
heard that's talked to me about this. It's amazing.
well, that's awesome. And I
Mhm.
have to look into it more. You just told me like more interesting information. I mean, that was probably one of the most important days of my life because that was, um, that day I just was trying to pay attention basically. Like I was like, okay, this is an important day. Like, let me just notice things more, which I think is the best way to use astrology is just like if you're aware that there are charged times, then it makes you more aware that you should be paying attention. It makes you more tuned in to your own like gut feelings, those kind of things. But I owned maybe like $40 worth of Bitcoin at that time, like in the Robinhood app. So I actually didn't even own it. I just owned like, the Robinhood whatever. But because of that, I had like a widget that showed me the Bitcoin price on my home screen. And so I opened my phone that day, and we were literally driving out to the beach, like to go view the conjunction. And I was like, oh my gosh, Bitcoin's back up to its all time high of 18K. Like, that's kind of interesting. I wonder if this is related. I'll go home and I'll learn about this when I'm done. And when I went and learned about Bitcoin, just there actually already were really good Bitcoin astrology articles that had been written by people, even at that time. And that was kind of my first introduction into it. And I realized, oh my gosh, like this is an Age of Aquarius technology. The Age of Aquarius is like the astrological age that we're entering into right now. It's a 2,000-year era. So it's like a really big astrological cycle. The previous era, the Age of Pisces, started with the birth of Jesus. So it's like we've been in the Age of Pisces. Now we're entering the Age of Aquarius.
If you look into that, which I was trying to see if I could find my old post about it. With microseed, you can engrave your entire seed phrase onto a durable titanium washer. It's the ultimate backup. Simple, indestructible, giving you true peace of mind and knowing your seed phrase is secured for life. Use my link in the description to get your kit. Satoshi. So many new styles and fully customizable. Use my referral link in the description or in the comments for 10% off your order. The Bitcoin Advisor for multi-sig custody solutions to store your Bitcoin, inheritance planning, and peace of mind. But if you look into that, it's weird because when you talk about these Age of Aquarius and Age of Pisces that Jesus was, and if that is a star or that at that time that conjunction happened at the same time where it like literally they said it's only happened, it happens it's very rare, I guess, and it happened
Mm-hmm.
through that time. So it just kind of makes you feel like it was this ushering and change of times.
Totally. That's how I felt. That's how I felt. It was because, the with 2,000-year cycles, like it's not like it's overnight, like you're in one and then you're in the other. It's a slow transition, but you get these moments of like a lot of new energy coming in. And so that conjunction, that like winter solstice 2020 conjunction was one of those moments where there was a lot. It was Saturn and Jupiter were together at the first degree of Aquarius. So right at the beginning of Aquarius, it was like these two outer planets basically ushering in more Aquarius energy. So it was, and Aquarius is all about decentralization. I mean, that is the theme of Aquarius. It's about being an individual within a collective of other individuals, not losing your individuality, not just dissolving yourself into the collective mass, but maintaining your individuality while recognizing that you're working with other people and that you're like part of society. That is what Aquarius is.
It's also weird that, which it's not a connection at all, but in my mind, it's when we talk about the liquidity in Bitcoin and I don't know. I'm just like, it's like the more liquidity will be coming into the Age of Aquarius. Interesting.
It's true. It's true. Like it's all these individuals, that are just like starting to get into this movement, but they don't ideally lose themselves in it. It
Yeah,
helps them become more of themselves is
right.
is really the thing with Aquarius in general. And so yeah, when I learned about Bitcoin and kind of just understood the structure of it, I was like, oh my God, okay, this is I don't want to say like it's not like Bitcoin is Jesus or something, but Bitcoin is this very important aspect of the Age of Aquarius. I think the Age of Aquarius probably is more broadly like internet, just digital life in general, but obviously Bitcoin is this like huge robust structure within that,
Mhm.
and so it
Well,
was
can I
just like
can I
so
mention
compelling.
something that I think is something that again I don't talk about much with people, but I just think it's again connecting sort of dots and signs and like I guess astrology would be, signs, right? Like it's kind of telling you a story of things that
I would call it I lovingly call it pseudoscience because it uses scientific methods, but it has no like rational plausible mechanism, right? Like I don't think that it's like the gravity or something I think you have to have some level of belief in intelligent design in order to think that astrology works. So it's
well, I
yeah,
mean
that's why I say it's
people
like between the two.
yeah, but people look for thousands of years they've used, astrology to do so.
Totally.
But
Hmm.
even if you think about quantum physics, they would say that's a pseudoscience, right? Because it's theoretical and it's not based on it's just
Yeah, there's
theory.
lots of people who would say magic is just stuff we don't understand. I
Mhm.
definitely I think uh, having worked in science for so long, I think that's why I'm so anal about the distinction because I do think it's important to understand what science can and can't do and what it can and can't study. And I think um like a lot of people turn science into a religion because they want science to be able to answer every question and they don't want there to be any unknowns. But
Right.
the reality is that there's only so far that rational and empirical reasoning can get you, like spiritual belief and irrational understanding or intuitive understanding, you could call it. Um, that's a huge part of like knowing and
Well,
understanding the world around you, right?
that's what I think I've heard scientists recently say that I don't remember which scientist said it, but somebody I think a few years ago I heard it and I thought, "Oh wow, they're actually recognizing the fact that the more questions you ask or the more answers you find, the more questions kind of get brought forth." And they said that that actually points more to the existence of God because you just keep finding these other rabbit holes and there's never really like they can't find just a clear answer. There's always more questions. So somebody did say that that's more of some kind of creator or something because we can't figure this out like all these years and all this intelligence we have yet we haven't found out. And then one thing that really blew my mind too was and I'll get back to that thought that I was gonna tell you about, but I recently heard about the James Webb Telescope discovering did you hear about that?
Which thing specifically?
It was about the physics being different back in early space or early, like, the Big
Mm,
Bang versus now and
yes.
how the universe is expanding at a different rate, so they were saying almost like that I don't know if you heard more about it, I haven't looked into it, but has that have more scientists come up and debunked this, or is it actually something they're really confused about because the space isn't accelerating at the same rate here as it was back so that kind of throws off physics as we know it, right?
Yes, it does. It throws off, yeah. So the way I would put it is when we had before James Webb, which James Webb launched in 2020, the previous space telescope that we were using was the Hubble Space Telescope.
Right.
And James Webb does the same thing that Hubble does, but it just has better instrumentation. So it's like smaller error bars, better data. It's just basically looking out into space and then we're making all these scientific discoveries and inferences based off of that data. So based off of the Hubble data, we we kind of came up with this idea of like the Big Bang because we had all these galaxies that were moving, we thought, away from us at a certain rate. And we were like, okay, so we can fit a curve to the line and that we can trace all the way back to 13.4 billion years or whatever it is. And let's just say that that's, there's all these various points of evidence that suggest that this is the best explanation for how the universe began. Now that we have better data with James Webb, several of those evidence points do not hold up anymore. One of them is like the accelerating, expanding universe where all the galaxies are supposed to be redshifting away from us at a certain rate that's expanding and accelerating. When you put better error bars on those measurements, you find that the curve doesn't fit anymore. And so now it seems like they're actually moving in like random directions, maybe. Um, and so, from my perspective, what scientists are trying to do now, and this is not every scientist, but the general scientific community is now they're trying to scramble to keep it together. Like they're like, oh, well, maybe it's just that in the early universe, physics worked differently and now it works this way. And it's like,
Right?
actually, maybe you guys just have no idea how life
Yeah,
started,
right.
how the universe started. Um, and you're just as much as the rest of us that have our theological beliefs, right?
Right.
I mean, in a lot of ways, the Big Bang is a very similar idea to like, and God said, let there be light. I think it's a natural, intuitive desire to want to believe that there was this like spark that started the universe. And maybe that's intuitively true. Like, I'm not dunking on that. Like, I think that we can maybe know that in some intuitive sense. And if we all come to that conclusion, if all the major religions all around the world seem to all think that, then maybe there's some truth to it. But I think if science is trying to say, oh, well, the Big Bang is real and let's just fit all the science to make it work, then science is functioning much more like religion than it is like true
Yeah,
science,
right.
you
Yeah,
know?
you're just trying to figure out ways to make it make sense.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I have this like theory which because I feel like ultimately like the God that there is some kind of creator, creator meaning design. Like I mean, I'm a religious person, but in my own crazy mind. So I just think that
Me too. Yeah.
there is a design to the universe, and that design is like that infinity, like things going in and out from each other. But I kind of think of it as the Big Bang is maybe when you think of a black hole sucking up an entire galaxy, what comes out of the other end of that black hole. And then I've heard stuff about white holes, and I'm like, maybe the Big Bang was just the universe blowing up into another new reality, uh, intertwined within itself. So I just think it's like some endless. I don't know, but it's crazy to think about, but I just think that people trying to make sense of this discovery is like maybe everything you think you are correct. Like they're just trying to make it fit some sort of idea that they're they don't want, because then otherwise it like destroys like you're like literally physics isn't physics everywhere. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the scientific community fought so hard to get the Big Bang theory and evolution taught in schools as fact, right? And um I think that to lose a pillar like that would be a huge blow to their credibility. And also, at this point, the people that are mostly in charge in science are, people who are close to retirement. They've built their entire careers off of these ideas. And so if you get rid of those ideas, all of a sudden there's a lot of Nobel prizes that don't make sense anymore. There's a lot
right.
of like publications and careers that their legacies are tarnished. So,
And look
um
at that shift also when you talk about the conjunction that happened in 2020. This James Webb was sent out there in 2020.
mhm.
So it's like it was out
Yeah.
there starting to learn during this transformative time. It's like things like that were launched.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And I think we're now entering, and part of the age of Aquarius is also the age of information. And I think we're entering into an age where there's no gatekeepers to information anymore. Anyone can access any information that they want to. I mean, we're kind of transitioning slowly, right? Obviously, there's still some secrets that are kept from the public. There's still some classified documents, et cetera, that kind of thing. But generally speaking, it's very, very hard to hide things now. And it's very hard to keep like a moat or like a walled fence between people who know, who are worthy of deciding things and saying the truth and all these things, and the people who aren't allowed to decide what's real or what's true. Like that boundary is becoming less and less over time. And so yeah, I think it's great that we have things like the James Webb telescope that can take all this data. I don't think we should stop trying to look at the universe and understand it, but I think the hold that science has had on kind of determining what's true is collapsing.
Right.
Um,
Well, then what you've been studying where people would have thought, that extra, that double side of you I don't know what you called it. I forgot. Like
my
another
double life.
double life. Yeah. The double life, the other version of you that's studying something that they would frown upon. Now it makes just as much, it could be just as valid as the side that was thought to be the truth, so
For sure. I mean, even just socially speaking, like my friends that I had friends that I worked with that did know that I was an astrologer. And, when I left my PhD to do Bitcoin and astrology full time, they were very like, oh my God, like, why wouldn't you stay in a stable career like we have? And then, Trump goes in and there's all these Doge funding cuts and everything, and
yeah.
Bitcoin's at 100K. This is 5 years later or whatever. And they're like, oh, wait, actually, it's not like what I'm doing is so stable, right? But I think it's more that the things that we thought were stable are no longer
Right.
stable. There is no stability when there's so much transformation happening. All you
Yes.
can do is kind of just like
And when you
ride the
know
wave.
that with Bitcoin, it's like there is some truth, there's ultimate truth there where, there's verifiable truth and where a lot
Yeah.
of things aren't. But so what do you do now when it comes, what's your like, what do you do daily? Do you do blogs or what's your thing? What's your career?
Yeah, I have a Bitcoin podcast called
Oh,
Hell
you
Money
do?
Podcast.
Oh,
Yeah, I do. Everyone, we've all got our Bitcoin
yeah. I
podcast.
love it. I love it. I gotta
But
watch
yeah,
yours more. I love it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's funny because it's me and like a super like technological dev type person, Casey Rodomore. So it's
Oh,
like
no
I'm
way.
the
That's
weird
awesome.
woo woo
Okay.
one, and then he's like super rational brain technical. So it's an interesting like dynamic between the two of us. Like
Oh,
whenever it
you
gets too
probably,
technical, I bring it back.
I would really love to hear yours because what was it called again? Tell us the name.
Hell money.
Oh, money. Okay. So I would love it because I know about Casey. He start
Ordinals, yeah.
Ordinals,
Yeah. Yep.
and I think that with everything that's happening right now with the whole core knots debate, I don't know, you guys are probably talking about that on the
Totally,
podcast.
yeah.
And, I'm part of this community where we're like, we run knots, we're just all about knots because we're like core is trying to censor, blah, blah. But at the same time, I think that, you know, this was a discovery that was made that you could put, what you want on the blockchain. And that was crazy that he discovered that, which is
Hmm.
crazy. But the thing is, now I have like a theory that the government, because they're all, you know, manipulative. So I have a theory that they are the ones trying to spam because everyone's saying, oh, the JPEG thing is the spam on the blockchain, but really it's like all this other illicit content that was like spammed onto the blockchain. So I think it's like all this extra, like it's the idea that the government could be the ones doing it just so they could have a reason to come around and say, "See, that's why we should censor it because all this stuff is on there, all
Yeah,
that illicit
I mean, to
content."
be honest, I think it's feds the whole way down, like, on both sides, and I think they're just trying to keep us in, like, looping arguments over and over and
Mhm.
over again so that no one actually does anything important and useful on Bitcoin.
Right, right.
Like, that's what I think personally. Because I mean, there was, in the example of, like, child pornography, there was child pornography, like, well before ordinals on
Yeah.
Bitcoin, and this is always just gonna be something if
And
you
you
think
know
about,
what?
like, the arguments
I
like
know that
against Bitcoin in
people
general, right? Like the Silk Road would be a good argument against Bitcoin for the same reasons. So it's like I think I think
but
it's just
I've
like
heard
they
people
just want us
mention
to
that.
argue.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I've heard people mention that, and it's like, obviously, that's the worst thing ever, right? Like, but I mean, I've been in Bitcoin for years, and I know you can, like, go back and find blocks and see if something was inscribed on it the way they do now with this ordinals protocol, but, I mean, I don't know how to go and like, how do people look on the blockchain to see this stuff? I don't even know, but I just think that's ridiculous because if anyone does know how to do that, they could find these illicit images, and it's horrible, but at the same time, it's, like, I've heard arguments about history being like, in all the times we've had history up until now, history can be it's written by the winners. It's written by the people, who want to make history the way they want it to be told. So it's really not transparent and true, So it doesn't mean that it's like, oh, we were the righteous ones always. Maybe they were terrible too, and they ended up winning. But I just
Yeah.
think that if you look back at the Bitcoin blockchain, you see the terrible things that humans did do. You could be like, wow, look how, um, you know, like pretty much like Neanderthals, they were like how horrible they were, and we wanna be different than that, because you could see
Yeah.
the history of humanity, and it's in an immutable chain where people can wanna change because they realize, so I think it could teach people something in the future.
Totally. I mean, and I think like, Bitcoin has undoubtedly been used for probably like child sex slavery, right? Like it's been used probably for the most egregious things
Just like
you can
fiat though,
think of.
right? Yeah.
Right, but like Bitcoin the money, right? That's
Mhm.
not even it's like, I think and we don't censor those transactions either. So I think it's just like the to me the phrase Bitcoin is for my friends and for my enemies, like that runs very deep where it's like the thing that protects me from censorship is the same thing that protects anyone else from censorship, even if I think that they're like the most morally reprehensible people around. So I think I like what you said about Bitcoin being this like immutable ledger of our behavior because I do think it's true that like because we have this record of economic transactions, but now also like cultural transactions, since people can put like arbitrary data like JPEGs or whatever you want into Bitcoin, you get this like record of the way that our thinking is evolving. At least the people that are participating in Bitcoin, whether that's like monetarily or like inscribing data, it's just like we do have this crazy record of our digital culture that will live much beyond our human
Yeah,
existences, you
it's
know?
like how they say the meme culture is becoming like memes can be powerful in the meme culture,
Mhm.
but it kind of you're right, like it goes from being a time chain to a history book combined with time. It's like you're not just you're literally just seeing the behavior of humans by what they post by memeing that stuff or like posting things that they think are important to etch onto a block. But like it's crazy to think that it's not just a time chain, which that's alone is incredible that Bitcoin is this time, it's like a new version of time. But just having that as a record keeper
Yeah. Yeah,
is
I call Bitcoin the digital megalith because I think it's like you can think of it like the pyramids of Giza or something like that, where it's like it is the most robust document of our current time, like our digital realm. And so just like these ancient megastructures have outlived the civilizations that they were built during, and they're kind of like the last remaining things of that civilization. I think Bitcoin is essentially primed to be like the best primary source archaeological document of the internet that you could imagine. And so it's like, yeah,
right. Like
exactly as you
even
said, like we have all this record of everything.
it's
And
another
it gets
reason.
downloaded in its entirety every time that you run a node, right?
Yeah,
So it's like,
it's
yeah, it's
crazy. It's another reason why we need to protect that because when you kind of correlate it to um social media and, what happened during COVID, and so many people woke up to the fact that they were lied to and manipulated by censorship through different social media sources, it really angered so many people because they thought, I don't want to be lied to. And that's why when Elon bought Twitter, even though it's not the ultimate decentralized platform, Nostr is really a place where it's like a place to be. It's new. But I think Twitter is our best option at the moment as far as finding truth that isn't as censored
Yeah.
as other places. But when you think of it in that way, nobody liked finding out that they were manipulated and they were, you know, silencing certain ideas or thoughts, because if they're controlling a narrative, the people in charge or the powers that be, they control how they could shift a population's way of thinking through this stuff. So that when that angers you, you should be angry against the fact that Bitcoin is trying to be censored. Whatever it is, you need to know the truth of what's out there, and then people do learn from that. Like history, they say like history repeats itself, but also people learn from things. And if the history is manipulated, how are you supposed to learn a lesson?
That's so interesting that you say that, and then you're on the not side. Because for me, that's what I think of knots. As I'm like,
Oh,
oh, they're trying to
really?
censor, right?
Oh,
Like,
you think
because
it?
knots is attempting to essentially filter and censor transactions, right? So I'm like, oh well, like, isn't that the side that's trying to censor? This is why I say I think it's
Yeah.
like both
Well,
sides.
this is
Like,
why it's important to kind of talk about, because I think people don't realize. So, wait, you're right. So I think Core wants to open it up so it could be allowing
yeah.
more, right?
Yeah, because so basically my understanding of it is so right now there's the op return limit, which like the op return is a place where you can put arbitrary data, whatever that is, like you could put a JPEG, you could put a text message, you could put anything there. Specifically, like technically all of these like L2 and ZK rollup projects want to put data for their L2 onto it. So it's like merge mining, that kind of thing. I'm like pretty I'm a Bitcoin maxi. I don't really think most like crypto stuff works, but I kind of understand that we need L2s and scaling solutions. And so even though a lot of them I think are essentially like privacy trade-offs and trust trade-offs that I wouldn't personally make in exchange for scaling, I do want them to be able to experiment and try to figure out like, can we have an L2 or many L2s on Bitcoin that actually work? Anyway, all that to be said,
Well,
like that's kind
so
of like the technical reason for wanting the op return limit lifted is because they want to stuff arbitrary data from their like L2s into Bitcoin.
yeah,
But you could also put anything in it, right? Right now, you can get around the op return limit by submitting private transactions to miners directly,
yeah,
which that's what they're all doing. So
right,
essentially, Core is just sort of acknowledging that that's already happening and
yeah,
being like, okay, let's not increase miner centralization by having all of these private mempools, essentially, where people submit private transactions. But like, let's just like say that, let's admit that this is happening, basically.
right.
That's from my perspective what's
So I
happening. So
think
that's why I'm like, it's interesting to
yeah, it's
talk to.
interesting. It is interesting because I think that from my idea, I think that when it comes to it reminds me of a Trojan horse situation in a way, because it's like, okay, when the node centralization becomes too centralized, and one, like, let's say this rift in the community didn't happen now, and it would have happened in 10 years when Core is like ultimately the only one that can decide to make changes, then I think that people wouldn't have a chance to change or to like be like, hey, I think there should be multiple nodes, and Bitcoin will still be Bitcoin. And just like how Casey found or discovered ordinals originally without Core making this change, it still can happen and it still does happen. I think Bitcoin is Bitcoin, and it just costs more to play the game, right? So I think it just won't allow maybe too much of this stuff. And I think only the most important or the most good projects could be, used on Bitcoin. But when I think of that censorship being different in a way where if you change the rules, and if they were to be allowed to be too like a monopoly or something in the system, then they could change more rules and more rules, and then it
Mm,
allows for to me it's the Trojan horse, like the slippery slope where more censorship can come into play based on maybe incentives from um funding from, let's say, any kind of company or corporation that has an incentive to block, or anything they want to change, it could just be allowed. And I think that
yeah.
this is just a slippery slope to say, okay, now we have the majority of the So it just scares me to think that that could be a type of a Trojan horse where that stuff could change more. So if you go with the not side, you're allowed to still do these things, but maybe sort of like not allow so much of it, but also not allow for future versions. Cause like one way I described it when we were talking about it with somebody was how, nature is a certain way and like farming and growing your own food. And then Bitcoin's that way, right now. But then a company or corporation comes in, which I think of core as a lot of companies or corporations backing, like big money backing,
Mm.
core projects. I think so. So I think that when a food industry comes in and says, guess what, we can make farming cheaper, faster, and change it up so it could be better for everybody, right? Because it's going to be better, but then it ends up like poisoning the system and making it
Sure.
worse. So I think that you think you're doing something good for the world because you're like, oh, we're helping you get food cheaper and faster. We're making it last on the shelves longer, but it's making everyone sick. So I kind of worry about that side of it, where it's like taking it away from where it was and how nature grows and how things, that pattern of nature and how things are organic, and then it's like it grows the way it will, and I think knots, there might be some side of it where they're trying to censor certain transactions, but for the most part, I think it's just we don't want to increase this thing so that people can still do things. You just have to pay to play or just
Hmm.
keep it as money. I think because what I think is that Core's idea is more we want big miners to benefit instead of, so I don't know.
Well, it's hard because it's so yeah, it's tricky. So basically, like, if you look at like these L2 companies that want to use the op return for their L2s, like as the example you gave, where like it's like these companies that have a ton of VC funding, they want a specific thing, right? What they're doing now is they're just submitting their transactions, usually to like Slipstream, which is Mara's service where they will take private transactions. So for a miner, it is always profitable to mine whoever will pay the most fees. Like to me, that's like the spam filtering. Is like if you can't pay the fees to put your spam on chain, then your spam's not going to go on chain and you're not going to pay millions of dollars to put nonsense on chain, right? Like you need to believe that there's value in what you're putting on if you're
Yeah.
spending money. So to me, it's like the spam filtering is in the fee network itself. And
Um,
like
yeah.
we're already limited by the block size, right? Like you can only have 4 megabytes of data in a block. That's just the limit that you have for any sort of Bitcoin block. So everyone is limited by that intrinsically. There's no one arguing for bigger blocks. We already did that, right? Like we
Mhm.
already went through the block size wars and we won the block size wars. And in that case, definitely was like miners and exchanges that wanted bigger blocks for their own benefit, and they lost, which is great. It's really good that that happened at that time. But so like we have the limit from the fee network and the block size. And then basically the problem that I see is like these, if you basically have these companies operating in their own private mempools, they're still getting into Bitcoin, but they're not submitting to all the miners. And so, if I'm a small mining pool, I have no chance of mining that transaction because it's not in the public mempool. So it's really only the big miners that have their own private mempools where they're accepting private transactions that don't fit the standardness conditions that Bitcoin Core previously had. Now they're updating to essentially include these things so they come into the public mempool. Um, that basically
That's
you're
the
just
part I have
having,
a hard time, I think, understanding that part. I'm just like, I get
yeah, like,
for me to say, I just want to totally like wrap my head around the idea.
right, yeah, it's like it's basically like, these transactions that like have all this arbitrary data or large op returns, let's say op returns that are bigger than the standardness limits. If you just tried to send that Bitcoin transaction, like using whatever wallet that you use, it wouldn't work. It wouldn't show up in the public mempool because it's not according to the policy that the public mempool allows for. And so whenever you have this really great like system that we have with mining where everyone is just trying to mine the block and whoever gets it gets all the transaction, all the block reward, all the fees, and then we move on to the next one. Like if your transaction is not being submitted to that, then what happens is miners that accept private transactions that don't fit the standardness limits, they have their own mempool. Like Mara is basically this. They have their own mempool where you can submit to them directly, and then they will mine the blocks that fit their rules that give them the fees. And so like you're no longer giving the smaller miners the opportunity to get those transactions, to get those fees, because the rules of like overall standardness, the overall policy doesn't allow for it. And so basically, like from my perspective, what Core is doing is Core is just acknowledging that that's already happening and being like, okay, well, let's just say that these transactions can be in the public mempool so that smaller miners can mine them, and so that we're not having this like split off where some people have their own private mempools and some don't.
So
I
you're
am like
saying that
pretty, yeah,
so
sorry.
you're saying no, no, I just wanna I want you to keep going because this is really good to figure this out, to explain and
Mhm.
have a interesting conversation about it to actually understand what's going on here. But so when people talk about I always hear about people getting a Start 9 or an Umbrella running their own node, and they want to confirm their own transactions through their own, so if they have a like a lottery miner at home, and now we were just talking with a company yesterday who, Satoshi, Lab, or I think it was Satoshi, I'm sorry, and they have a new, miner, like a home miner that's like a lottery miner, but
Mhm.
stronger, so you can have more of a chance to win a block, even though it's very, very slim. But it's a better version of that. So if somebody were to win that block, running their own node, let's say running knots, then what happens? Like, you don't win it or you don't get that
They don't
reward?
see all of the transactions. So basically, like, it depends because knots also, I think there's different filters that you can apply for
Mm,
transactions that you'll accept, right? If you mine that block. So they have like different strictness levels. Basically, like there's like super strict where they like really try to filter out like anything that's not like monetary, although it's very difficult to chase that down. But like super strict to like not strict at all. I think they have like several options. But basically, let's say you're like that lottery, like home miner that gets the block, you will only put the transactions in that fit the filter that you have. And
okay.
so what that means is that you're excluding potentially transactions that pay higher fees. You're getting less reward basically for mining that block. So it's
So you get less
unprofitable.
reward 'cause if it's 3.5 Bitcoins right now, you get
So
less.
that's the so you get the block reward, but then there's
Oh,
also the transaction fees on top of that,
oh,
right?
okay.
So like imagine that you have all of these like people that want to pay, let's say 10 sats per vbyte to put in their L2 data or whatever it is, or their JPEGs, whatever. And they have all these transactions that are submitted at 10 sats per vbyte, but then you have a mining software that filters all those transactions out. And so you're only mining the transactions that are paying, let's say, 1 sat per vbyte. So you're going to get less reward than someone who has no filter at all. So it's economically unprofitable basically for miners to choose to filter than to not filter. And so that's why basically like
Yeah,
Mara started their own private mempool because they were like, hey, well, if Core's not going to accept these transactions, we're just going to have our own mempool because we would like those fees, right? Like that's what Bitcoin is at the end of the day, right? It's a profit incentive network where it's like everyone, all the miners are competing with each other to mine the block
and when
to
you
get the
think about it,
transaction fees to get the block reward.
when you're a single person, you're winning a block at home and you win a 3.5 Bitcoin, you're kind of like, who cares? The fee is great. That'd be awesome to have more, but you're probably just thinking, I'm so happy I won that block. That's means the world to me, I think. But when you have a company that wins blocks constantly because they're always making blocks, then they want to win more of those fees because those make big differences, even though they're constantly winning blocks. It's like we also want all the extra money from every fee. So it does incentivize, I think, bigger companies to want that more. But I think young like people at home would just be happy to win the block reward. They probably wouldn't
I
think
don't
too
even
much.
know, but I'm not sure when the last time a solo miner even won a block.
Mhm.
Like most solo miners are usually in pools with each other, at least. I have 3 miners that I run at home, and I participate in like Parasite Pool because it's just like if I were just to like do it on my own, then it's like I'm never gonna like get a
Yeah,
block, right?
it's
Even now, the
super
pool that
rare.
I'm part of, which is very like home miners, like decentralized, like not big miners. I think like the estimated block, like time to get a block is like 5 years or
I
something.
think
Like
I
it's,
heard it's like
you know,
something more like 1,000 years, or
yeah, if
something.
you're an individual, for
Yeah,
sure it is. Yeah. So it's like, I think the way to think about it is like, the people that the companies that have the majority of the hash rate, they are running so many devices and they're using so much energy. And so their cost of production is so close to their cost of reward. Like they need to scrape. It's not like they're like, yum, 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 I want more and more Bitcoin. It's like they have a huge cost for their facilities. And so they really do need to be running as profitably as possible, which is what we want. Again, like this is what Bitcoin is, an incentive network where we transform greed, which is like
yeah,
the desire for more and more profit, into a trustless system where you don't need to trust that everyone is playing by the rules, because if they don't play by the rules, they don't get the Bitcoin that
yeah.
comes in that block, right? So
Well, then I
like
also think too, like if you allow, like if they need to get the most out of their mining because they're spending so much on, fees and equipment and electricity, all this stuff, but that's like, I recently started uh, me and my husband, we just got these minors that I feel like I just adopted 2 children from another country, you know how, like, you do that? And, so we just adopted these 2 minors, and I feel like they're my babies, and I wish I could watch them all day and have a camera on them and just see what they're doing. But it's like this mining as a service thing where the place they're located is, by this hydro, facility
Mhm.
where it's, like, near a dam. So the fees are so much cheaper for electricity there because they're using natural resources, but I think that, so they provide mining as a service, which is great because you just host your miner there and it's awesome. So I'm super excited about that, but I just think that if they're like scrambling with, hey, we're not making as much money because things are costing a lot, then you better go green and you better like so it's this incentive network, like you said,
Totally.
where they're like, hey, we better figure out a way to make this renewable because we're spending way too much money on electricity and we need to keep more of this profit. So because of greed,
Mhm.
they would help the world, and find
Yeah,
better ways to work.
that's what I always tell my
Mhm.
friends that are like, my non-Bitcoin friends that are like, "Oh, doesn't it use so much energy?" And I was like, "Well, it's the only free market incentive to create renewable clean energy. There's
Right.
no other reason really to try to build out electricity grids and like huge electricity generators that are based on cheap free energy. Like it's just Bitcoin. And so yeah, it's like I think this is what I'm saying. Like Bitcoin is it's a tool that transforms our greed and our desire for profit into something that's good for the planet, not because we're like virtue signaling or forcing ourselves to do this or kind of like using what I would call like unsustainable incentives, which are just like guilt and fear in order to do it. It's like we're using a generative incentive, which is like our desire to succeed, our desire to prosper, and we're transforming it into a system that allows us all to do that and all to do it
Right.
in a fair way.
I
So
love that.
yeah, I mean
And
it's a beautiful thing.
even if people were to, let's say, okay, like it's not the block size wars, it's just knots and core. And if let's say solo miners choose to do one thing and bigger miners choose to do another, it really doesn't matter at the end of the day, right? Like if both of them continue, I mean,
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It doesn't
yeah,
the only thing I do worry about with Knots is that Luke Deshire is the only maintainer, and so you basically have, like, a single point of failure, from the dev side, and Luke Deshire, like, non-insignificantly was hacked for 300 Bitcoin back in January 2023, and he worked with the FBI giving names of Bitcoiners who attended TabConf in order to try to figure out who hacked him. So, I don't trust him personally. Um, if there were other competent devs that were working on Knots, I would feel a lot better about it, but
how is he
I
the
don't
only
think it would
one? I've
be
heard that before too, but how is he the only one maintaining it?
um because he's kind of crazy, like he's like it's his like project, right? And yeah, I don't think there's anyone else who's really super interested in contributing to
Do
it.
you see that,
Is my
like,
understanding.
would there be a future where there's many different, because I think there's more than just core and knots. I think there's like 16 of them. But do you see that there will be just so many, like almost like a diverse ecosystem of that stuff, or do you not see that being a thing?
I'm honestly not sure. I mean, I think I definitely share your concern about core being centralized and easy to control. I think that from my experience, I know many Bitcoin core developers, they are so unprepared for, like, political lobbying and
Yeah,
propaganda
that's
that,
what I think I
like,
worry
they're
about.
yeah, it totally, I feel the same way. They're very,
Because
like,
they're
technical
so
people,
good at
right?
that.
Like
They're so good at manipulating and giving you or,
totally.
paying people off, you know,
Mhm.
making it seem like, you know what I mean? It's just they're so good at that. They're like professionals at convincing people and making it seem like you have to, maybe even blackmailing, I don't know. Like, they're
Yeah,
just so good
yeah.
at this stuff and like, so it's scary to think that, yeah, you're a developer, but as Bitcoin and the price and everything, and it becomes more people coming in, if they have more of a way to manipulate, it's worrisome too. So but that's what
And I
I
think
love
yeah.
about it. So whether you think one side or the other, I think Bitcoin will be fine because everything will continue to grow and it's still all Bitcoin, and it won't be that. I think it's less scary when there's more diverse, or I guess decentralization when it comes to this. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I think, like, it'll be interesting to see like, right now, I do think, obviously, there are some companies that are funding Bitcoin core developers to achieve certain things that they want, like, that is happening. It's not my impression that we have, like, a lot of like, there's no, like, political actors that are trying to do it for, like, their political aims, at least from what I've seen. I've never seen, like, evidence of that, but that will happen, like,
Right.
that will happen.
Yeah.
So, I think it's It's a really tricky situation to be in, to be a Bitcoin core dev, because most of them are just technical people that don't actually even wanna talk to people usually, like, they're not, like, socially or politically minded in that way, and then all of a sudden they are maintaining, a trillion plus dollar code base, and, yeah, I don't think that they're prepared for the type of political attacks that will happen, could already be happening, and I just don't know about it, but
Right.
um, yeah, and so that is, like, definitely a concern for me, and I think that I don't know, that is maybe just, like, a hurdle that we're gonna have to figure out as it comes. I also it's very interesting, I thought that we were gonna reach this phase where the government was gonna fight us a lot more, and now it's, like, doesn't seem to be happening, so things can always play out in ways that you don't expect,
Yeah.
you know?
But then I
Um
think I heard somebody was sharing today in my community something that Luke said, and it was like really doom like, and everyone's like, I don't really like his like how he said that, but he was pretty much saying like some crazy thing about like if 85% of the people don't actually use their node, and if people just have it as like a silent um not actually using the node, I guess, and just having it running. But he was saying something about like Bitcoin will be like will cease to exist, or Bitcoin will fail, or you know what I mean? Everyone's like, "Bitcoin will
yeah.
fail?" That's a pretty significant statement to say Bitcoin will fail, because I think a lot of you so when you said he's a little crazy, like, I mean, it's just kind of like, is it trying to be like, let's sound the alarm to get more people interested in this topic, to be like, we need to make sure Bitcoin doesn't fail? But for me, I think like, yeah, when you hear comments that are extreme like that as a Bitcoiner, you're like, I think Bitcoin's already won at this point. Like, we're just trying to make sure it stays decentralized and secure,
Mhm.
and I think that's what I heard somebody else mention, that this is just Bitcoin's ecosystem, or an immune system kind of like firing up.
Mm.
So it's like if things happen, there's going to be more people that get involved. It won't just be a small group of devs. It'll be like more people doing it. And it's just, I don't think it's a bad thing when you have decentralization in all different aspects of Bitcoin. So I
Yeah,
don't know.
I agree. I
Yeah.
agree. Yeah, I definitely think I mean, I think Luke will probably continue sounding the alarm to promote his own mining pool, until the mining pool eventually goes under because it's not profitable because they filter out all the high transaction fees. Um, Luke takes $750,000 a year as salary from ocean mining, even though I think they only raised like 6 or 7 mil, so they do not have that long to continue their VC runway before they have to be profitable as a mining company, which they are not currently. And so I think like a lot of it, this is my opinion, but I think Luke is very self-serving in the sense that like he wants to drum people up and be like, you have to run knots, you have to use ocean mining. Otherwise, Bitcoin will fail because ocean mining will fail and his company will fail if you don't do that. You know what I mean? Like Bitcoin, you're totally right. Bitcoin will be fine. Bitcoin will survive. But Luke, his vision of Bitcoin and what he wants for it, he
Yeah.
needs people to be, like, riled up and fighting on his side,
Well, yeah.
and
So I think like when I think of ocean mining, I wonder if it just means like more hydro mining and stuff like that. Like, if is that why it's called that? I don't know. But I think that there should be a way, which that's what I've always thought, like how you said you would tell your friends that it incentivizes people to, like, because of greed, it incentivizes people to find better ways to come up with technology to make this cheaper to do, because they want to keep more of their profits, right? So you don't want to pay an electricity company. So I just think that
Mhm.
somehow or another, whatever happens, it's going to be diverse. And I think that it's kind of like a short term people just trying to. It's very like people get very heightened emotions over this, and does that have something to do with this astrology at this time?
I was gonna say, I was like, I could bring it back to the astrology.
Yeah,
'Cause, yeah,
because
we're going through, like, a very difficult, um, like, transit to Bitcoin. Bitcoin has its natal Mercury in Aquarius, and right now Pluto is going through Aquarius, and Pluto's this planet, it's the ruler of the underworld, like, Pluto is Hades in Greek mythology, and so it's
I'm
like
Greek. Yes, I know.
the ruler of the underworld, that brings up all the muck that we don't want to see from beneath the surface, all the dark forces that are working under, under the ground in the ether or whatever. Pluto like brings that up so that we have to look at it and we have to see it. And so like Pluto is basically transiting through Aquarius from 2024 to 2044. So this is like a 20-year period where Pluto is basically going through all these Aquarius themes and bringing up all the dregs that we don't like want to face but have to face. And Bitcoin has a ton of placements in Aquarius, unsurprisingly, of course, right? Like, so I'm saying it's such an Aquarius technology. And the one that's getting hit right now is its natal Mercury, which is the communication, connection, network aspect. And so right now, with like Pluto kind of dredging up all of this like gunk basically around the way that we communicate about Bitcoin, the way that we connect about Bitcoin, and the way that the Bitcoin network works itself. Like I think this even relates like what I was saying about the private mempools and the public mempools, where I'm like, well, there's all this stuff that's happening in private mempools and we can acknowledge it or we cannot acknowledge it, but like that's what's happening, right? And like we have to kind of look at it and see it. I feel like that's what we're doing right now, even with like the way that we're talking about it, the way that we decide when is an appropriate time to change Bitcoin or not change Bitcoin, or what's worthy of changing or not worthy of changing. Like all of these conversations, I think we're getting the worst versions of them so that we can see them and we can acknowledge them, and hopefully we can like transform them and clear them out and move past them. The transit to Bitcoin's natal Mercury ends in February, March of 2026. So my personal opinion is like we will be through this and we'll kind of be on the other side, and whatever that looks like by like Q1, Q2 of next year. But that's not the end of like Pluto transforming aspects of Bitcoin's Aquarius placements. Like the next 20 years are going to be a very transformative time for Bitcoin, unsurprisingly. I mean, of course, right? You don't need astrology to know that.
Well, what
So
comes after Pluto after the next 20 years?
So Pluto is like the slowest moving. It's the furthest out of the planets, and so Pluto is basically like when it's in Aquarius, it takes the longest amount of time there, and then after it's in Aquarius, it will go to Pisces, and it like will continue moving through
Wow,
the
so now we're
zodiac.
living the longest cycle of Pluto.
We are, yeah. I mean, the last time that Pluto was in Aquarius was the American Revolution. So
Holy
like,
crap. That's like the
it's a
fourth
big.
when they call it the fourth turning, is that kind of aligning with all this stuff then?
The fourth turning is actually the Uranus cycle, which is 84 years, because the fourth turning is like 80 years, right? So currently, and like, yeah, fourth turning people talk about this a lot. I just call it the Uranus return cycle because I'm an astrologer, but Uranus is about like the revolutionary cycle. And so the last time that Uranus was where it is now was World War II. Before that, it was the Civil War. Before that was the Revolutionary War.
So what about
So
Pluto? When was the last time we had this 20-year?
the American Revolution, Revolutionary War. So
Sure.
we're getting, yeah, those two are overlapping for the first time ever, actually, where we have like Uranus return and Pluto return happening at the same time. So it's like, it's a very intense time for
For the
America,
first time
especially.
ever?
Well, if you look at
Continuous
it from the perspective of the US, yes.
Okay.
Like the planets often have like, conjunctions and relationships with each other. I specifically look at like the astrology of right now to like historical, like I look at like things like Bitcoin, the US, the UK, China, whatever. Like I'll look at like specific charts and see like when was the last time for this empire or this organization
Yes.
did this happen.
So you're looking at
So,
empires globally, not just the US, in that
yes,
short
yeah.
span. Okay.
Yeah, and the Pluto return, which is that like so it takes Pluto 250 years to go the whole way around the zodiac, and that's why like 250 years ago that was the American Revolution. That's why we have like America 250, I think is this summer, right? Or 2026 summer, right? That's 250 years.
Yeah.
We're going through that right now. That cycle is like the empire rise and decline cycle that Ray Dalio, who's an economist, talks about. Ray Dalio has written like multiple books about the 250-year
Yeah.
empire rise and decline cycle. Like that is literally the Pluto return cycle.
Well,
And I'm
honestly,
like,
when I see things happening in the world, like the whole fire in Nepal at the parliament and the
mm-hmm.
minister of finance being chased into a river naked, and then when I saw where was it? Somewhere where they're saying that I don't know if it was, I can't remember the country, but there was just the other day, yesterday maybe, um, where the CBDCs are not allowing people to withdraw their money from banks. And it's like those all are like signals of collapse, like domino effect
Yeah.
things happening. And like it could be something that paranoia part of me is like, oh my gosh, is the US at some, but it just feels like you're seeing these little breadcrumbs of collapse now throughout the world. And who knows by next year how different things could be.
Yeah,
So
I think we are. I mean, I think the institutions that we've come to rely on for, I mean, like the past couple hundred years really are falling apart. That doesn't mean that the whole world is going to shit. Obviously, there's plenty of things that are beginning and building at this time. Bitcoin is one of them. But it's like not easy. Like that's just the beginning, right? Like they're not at their like peak form, like Bitcoin as an example, right? Like we're still so early, but we really are still so early. Like there's definitely increasing adoption, especially over the last year or so, but we're not anywhere close to the role that Bitcoin will play in society. And so, I mean, we talked about this actually at the very beginning of the episode, but like I think when you learn about Bitcoin, when you learn about fiat, the collapse of fiat that's inevitable, that's already happening, we're already living through it. We already have inflation of every asset. Why does every house cost $1 million when they're clearly not worth $1 million? Like, it's once you learn about fiat and you learn about Bitcoin, I think it gives you a lot more faith for the future because you realize, okay, there is hope. There are structures that can come in that can fix these problems, and not by violent force, not by violent uprising, but just because it's superior technology and it fits more naturally into our digital lives and it just works better than fiat does. Like that's a beautiful example of something that it's a nonviolent revolution. And I also have to believe that there are many other things like that. It's just like Bitcoin is the one that like chose us or spoke to
Yeah.
us. So that's what we're on. But I think there's a lot of things like Bitcoin that are just existing in small pockets that we just don't know about yet because they haven't like reached their full form. They haven't hyper Bitcoinized, whatever the equivalent is for them. So I'm
Um,
optimistic about the
yeah.
future despite the chaos.
Me too. I am too, and I think maybe that's why it's nice to have women in Bitcoin talking with each other because I think that not that the guys aren't, all the men in the space are very great and helpful and informative. All these people that I have in my crew online, they're all super helpful and everything. But I just think that it's nice to talk to somebody and have just an like, just exploring and being curious about things, and just asking different questions and kind of wondering about, like, how things will work and shape and wanting to just learn about it all, and keeping an open mind, but also being kind about it, not getting,
Hmm.
angry or you know what I mean? It's just kind of like we all wanna learn and we all wanna, see how this future unfolds. So it is nice to talk. I love having women Bitcoiners on because
I
it's just
know.
it
I
feels
know. I think because like it's not like a default thing for us to be into something like this. A lot of women in Bitcoin end up being like very like based or whatever, for lack
yeah.
of a better word. It's like you kind of do have to be a very free thinking woman, I think, to be into this in the first place. So I feel like it does already pre-select for really good people.
It's messed up. Yeah, I mean, because I feel like and I don't know how you are, but I don't have a lot of women in real life that I'm friends with.
Hmm.
I get along with people, with my fiat mining job, I get along with people because I'm, work in a social job, but it's not like I have a lot of people in my life that just get me. So it's just really nice to
Yeah,
find people that I could talk to and just
totally.
know a lot about the same stuff. I
Yeah,
do
I
want
feel
to
the same
ask,
way.
yeah, I want to ask you about something that I wonder if you would have any kind of insight on because it's something that I think is just a weird connection to, I guess, Bitcoin, but I wonder if it has an astrological connection to you. But this is this is something that I think before I found out about Bitcoin, I used to have like a doom and gloomer kind of parent. Like my dad used to talk about the Mayan calendar, and it was around the time
Mm,
that I was having a kid. And I'm like, Dad, but you keep saying like the world's gonna end in 2012, December 21st, 2012. And I was like, I'm having a baby or I just had a baby. I don't want to think about this end of the world. Like, what are you talking about? And he would always talk about this Mayan calendar coming to an end. And I'm like, okay, Dad, the day came and went. And I didn't think much of it. I was like, okay, he was wrong, obviously. So thank God. But I always wondered why did the Mayan calendar stop at a certain date or what was that about? And I just was curious. And then when I learned about Bitcoin after a little while, I started to think about the timing of Bitcoin and how we think of it as a clock and how this calendar is a unit of measurement of time. And then I started to think about how these stars and astrological cycles and it's like I don't know how it makes sense to me, but I don't know if you maybe have any input on it. But I think that with it's not that Bitcoin was created in 2012, but I think it's first halving. So it's almost like the clock started when the halving happened or something.
mhm.
So I just wonder if that's like the new like age clock that the Mayans predicted. I don't know.
Yeah, I know, I love that take. That's so good. Yeah, I think like I mean, I think time is so the Mayan calendar, there's not an astrological association for why it ended. I actually don't know if anyone really knows like
Okay.
why
I
why
don't
it
think I
ended at
have
that
found
time.
anything.
But I think but I feel like that's part of the grand mystery of it. Like I feel like part of it is that, we have these imperfect ways of trying to capture time. Like, time is the one thing that we can't control. We don't fully understand it. It seems like both like constant and regular, but also weirdly like malleable and strange if you look at it on the edges, like it's a very weird thing. And I think like we have these attempts at like capturing time and trying to like explain our place in the world. And I feel like the Mayan calendar was like one of those things where they were trying to be like, okay, here's what's happening, but it can only last for so long. And at some point it becomes irrelevant. And I think that that's also part of like the shifting of the astrological ages, which I'm sure they knew about as well. Um, but I think I totally agree. Bitcoin is a clock. It is like a decentralized timekeeping mechanism where when you mine a block, you put that timestamp in, everyone agrees that's what time it is. We keep going, we go to the next block, which has to happen after in order to maintain the longest chain. And if you think about it, like the the stars, the planets, everything, that's like the only form of natural decentralized timekeeping that we have. Like I can look and see where the sun is in the sky and I can tell you what time of day it is. I can look at like where the moon and the sun are relative to each other and I can tell you what time of the month it is. I can tell you where the sun is on the horizon, tell you what time of the year it is. Like all these cycles. And then if you go to the other planets, then you can get longer term cycles, right? Like Pluto takes 250 years to go the whole way around. So that's like a pretty good cycle to be able to look at. And so I think like Bitcoin is essentially like exactly as you said, it's like a discovery of a new way of timekeeping that I think fits for the digital age. One of the things that I did actually with my arbitrary data that I stuffed onto Bitcoin is I inscribed planetary positions onto sats from the exact time that they were mined in order to create a tether between astronomical time and Bitcoin time.
Oh,
So
that's
like let's say that
cool.
there was like a sat that was mined right now, like whatever block just got mined and the 3.25 or 3.125 Bitcoin that just came out of it, that would have that exact timestamp. And I basically just would take the planetary positions and inscribe it onto that sat. And like that would be the inscription was like the planetary data to try to like connect so
Yeah.
that so that if you have Bitcoin as this like archaeological record, right? Like we were talking about, and you were like, well, what time did this happen? Like when, I don't know what is January 3rd, 2009. Like I don't know what that is, that you could actually look at the planetary positions and realize like when Bitcoin existed and kind of like place us in time. So
Cool
I
because
love that you brought that up because that's like a very important thing to
wow.
me. I'm like, if that's the one thing that I did for Bitcoin, like that's enough, you know?
Cool. Yeah, because it's not just the time, it's also the visualization of the history of it. So,
hmm
so when we look at the planetary cycles, we're looking at the physical version of what time looks like to our physical bodies, but then
Yeah.
to all people who aren't here or weren't here back then when we used to see the stars and, see the sunrise and set, like to everyone who's looking back at that time chain, they're able to see what we saw, or just kind of put it all, tie it together, right? So that's amazing. But I love that. And I love that you verify or sort of validate my thoughts on thinking of that because nobody knows the reason why the Mayan calendar ended.
hmm
But it just, to me, it just seems like it was like this thump on a drum, like, the first block happened or the first halving happened. And then it was like, then it started really, like turn. And that was around that 2012 December time, and I think that maybe when you said it becomes irrelevant, maybe at a time where it becomes irrelevant, if there was a way that they could have known this would happen, or it's crazy to think, why or how,
hmm
but just the coincidence of things kind of is weird to me. Just thinking about it, like why then out of all times when we have this discovery of a new way to tell time, like we're not having to tell it by the stars now unless you connect those two together like you're doing, but we're doing it by 10-minute block times. you
Yeah.
know
Totally.
it's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. I mean, why 2140 for the end of the block reward, right? Like there's a
Yeah,
lot of like questions
right.
where it's like, we don't know fully the answer. We don't know what Satoshi was thinking. We don't know who Satoshi is. I feel like if you think
Yeah,
of Bitcoin as like a Mayan calendar, like the allegory there, it's like there are some decisions that are made that maybe even the people that were actively a part of it don't know why. And it just, intelligent design, that
it's
kind of
so
stuff. Sometimes
insane. I
things
can't
just,
I and I think that sometimes I just think that there's so much we don't understand, and we could finish this up I'm keeping you for an hour at this
We've
point.
gone through so many, topics,
I
I love it, you
know.
know?
I'm like, I can go on to so many tangents right now, but just thinking about, like, there's this theory, that first of all, I think okay, it probably isn't, but there's a theory that Satoshi was John Nash, and John Nash was, from A Beautiful Mind, that movie, and he
Mhm.
was portrayed as this he had like a psychotic break. He was schizophrenic or something, and sometimes I wonder if maybe he was such a genius that he looked schizophrenic or paranoid to people, but really maybe he had this extra intuitive sense to the who knows? Like maybe he could like connect to people have theories about Satoshi being a time traveler, about like, all these different things, but it's just like maybe the craziness that people saw, maybe he had some kind of connection to some sort of other deity. I don't know like what the heck I'm thinking, but
Yeah,
he found whoever this was, whoever Satoshi was, again, the timing is weird because if this discovery was made or how to actually perfect Bitcoin, and then they put it out on Halloween, first of all, which is like spooky to the people, to the powers that be.
uh
And then also the fact that he put it out there right after the great financial crisis. It's like you didn't just like, okay, this crisis is happening. Let me solve Bitcoin today. It was like you actually have already been working on it and then you finally decided on that day to put it out. So it's like, why at that time? And it's just the
yeah,
timing of things is just crazy to me to think that it was um, done then. And and then here's my last little weird thing that I'm gonna say, and then I'll let you finish up your closing thoughts on this. But sometimes when I think about all these crazy connections between science or spirituality and stuff like that, I think of the Bible, like, the part of the Bible where it talks about, like, weirdly enough, the end of the world or, like, the revelation. But it says something about, like, um, Jesus will come at the right hand of God or something. And when I don't think I like how you said earlier, like, I'm not saying Bitcoin is Jesus or something, but I think that something that will be a savior to humanity as far as it being like a almost like a prediction for something that will help us and give us freedom um and almost like, free will, because that's, like, what God ultimately wants is free will for people. I think of when I think the right hand of God, I think God being that design, and I think of that design being mathematics, and I think of it being
mhm,
geometry, and when you think of Bitcoin as this code and following a pattern and the way that it grows is like a spiral, they say, like, the way when you look at how adoption's growing and all these things, it's always like this pattern that reminds you of that pattern of nature, and I just think if it's at the right hand of like the savior, it doesn't have to be Jesus will come, but it could be like the savior will come at the right hand of this design. I think of it like in
yeah.
terms of that. I just think that this thing has been predicted or been for like someone saw it or someone people knew that this was inevitable or something like that. I don't know.
No, for sure. I mean, I think, like, if you think about, like, the Bitcoin white paper was essentially just the discovery of blockchain technology, which, like, that could have just as easily been
Yeah.
invented by a company that would then create a terrible product with it, right? But instead, it was brought to everyone's anyone who wanted to know the information could find it by a pseudonymous discoverer who disappeared. I mean, like, it is an immaculate conception story that is just so there's literally nothing like it. There's literally nothing like it. There's no great technology that I think has that origin story. And I think we're so lucky. Obviously, I think it's also like divine design, intelligent design, but we are so lucky to be in a timeline where that was
I
freely
say that
given.
too. I say
You
that
know?
too.
It's
It's
it's incredible.
it's almost
Like,
like the people that are here existing now. Like I feel like we are here because we wanted to experience it and we like chose to be here during this
that's what I
transforming
think too.
time. You
That's
do?
what I
Okay.
think too. Yeah. Yeah, I think everyone chooses, like, their life, and they choose to be here at the time that they're here, and, like, we chose to be a part of this experience,
That's
and it's
so
like,
cool.
yeah, it's incredible. No, but I also John Nash is, like, my number 1 candidate for who Satoshi
Really?
is too, yeah.
That's
And I
awesome.
totally agree with you. I think, like, it's just he had access to, like, understanding that was difficult for someone to digest in a human consciousness, like, you couldn't know everything that God knows. You couldn't handle it. Like, your brain, your nervous
Wow.
system, like, we can't handle that. And I think, yeah, I also feel similarly that I feel like it's possible slash probable that John Nash was just like, there was just too much coming in for his human brain to be able to
Yeah.
comprehend, but that it was messages that he ultimately, if he was Satoshi or whoever was Satoshi, that like they were able to channel it into a way that got it out there in the way that it needed
Mhm.
to be brought into the world.
And when you
So
think
it's
about that
really,
movie,
it's
yeah,
incredible.
it's like I didn't really think about it because I had seen it before I became a Bitcoiner. When the first person brought it up to me, I was like, no way, because that he actually it's like the movie, I mean, I don't know too much about him, but I saw the movie A Beautiful Mind, but just the game theory that he realized, and that's what we always talk about in Bitcoin. Um and then he was so paranoid, which Satoshi was ultra paranoid.
Obviously. Yeah.
He didn't want from the very first message, no one knew it was him. And this guy was so insanely paranoid, and he talked about the government following him or watching him or this or that, and it's like, um maybe he was not lying. Maybe everyone thought he was totally nuts, but he's like, "They're on to me. I'm figuring something out. I have to do this."
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I don't know. It's just kind of nuts. But yeah, I'm so glad that you think that too. That's really cool because I didn't think about that till recently. But what an incredible being, whoever that was. And it's so crazy. And I love that you have a lot of the same ideas I have. And it gives you more validation that you're not the only one thinking some of these thoughts. And I'm happy I got to ask somebody about the Mayan calendar and, just, we never know who the right person is to ask about certain things. So yeah, I love hearing about the cycles. I love what you're doing. I'm definitely going to check out your podcast. So can you let people know again where to find you so they can look you up?
Yeah, I'm at Realizing Erin on X. That's like my personal account. And then Hell Money Podcast. We put out episodes every other week. Usually it's a mix of Bitcoin technical stuff and me doing my weird like vibes, astrology,
Love
like
it.
spirituality assessment. So it's a good mix.
I love it.
But yeah. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was awesome. I like loved this conversation. This
Thank
was great.
you. Yeah, this was so great getting to know you, and I can't wait to hear more. Thank you
You
so much.
too.
Have a great day.
You too.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.